Good Tuesday morning, everyone. Did you get excited about hearing Pastor Rick and the message that he gave just on the spur of the moment at our 15th year anniversary, which was Sunday, April 14th? I was just in awe of him. We didn't know what we were going to do when our video replay of the previous night's sermon failed. So you saw the start of that yesterday, and I hope you got a kick out of it. But Rick just jumped up. People said they were so blessed by the content and that they had had loss in their life. That indeed, he talked about grieving and little deaths, because not all grieving is about loss of a person. It can be about loss of lots of things, and he'll mention those things. Life is full of losses, and we all related to that. So we're going to spend 3 days listening to Pastor Rick. It was a short sermon. And then on Friday, I have a very special day planned for us, because I did get to ask him one question that I have really wanted the answer to. And that question was, well, out of all the pastors that would be potential to follow up on and take your place, Rick, how did you come up? How did you ever find Pastor Andy and his wife Stacy? What was it out of all the people? And he gave such an insightful answer. I can't wait to share that answer with you on Friday. Right now, let's go and listen to Pastor Rick Warren and his on-the-spot sermon.
I'm training leaders around the world, and we are adding about 50,000 churches a month to this movement called Finishing the Task. In December, I was in Africa, and we had the leaders of 55,000 churches. And they came, and I took a team with me, and we trained them. So we added 55,000 African churches. The next month, in January, I brought the leaders of the 16 largest churches in Latin America, all Spanish-speaking churches, who all have these big networks, and they all signed on to Finishing the Task. And they represent about 80,000 churches. The next month, I spoke in England to the Anglican pastors and priests there, and they signed on. And then the next month, we had the two leaders of the biggest networks in India, 40,000 churches and nearly 60,000 churches signing on. So I have prepared a new class online. It's called the Healthy Church Leader Master Course. And it's starting next week. And what I did is it's 36 lessons, and it's free for any pastor who wants to teach it. So I had my team go back and find every message that I had taught, not on Sunday, but to the staff over 43 years. Leadership lectures on character, integrity, skills, and stuff like this. And they found and catalog 1,100 messages on leadership that I had taught to my team over 43 years. So then I picked out 36 out of that to do that. But let me just share something with you that I had in my quiet time just recently. We just celebrated Easter, and there are actually several parts to the Easter story. There's the crucifixion, then there's the resurrection, okay? Then there's the 40 days where Jesus walks around on earth after the resurrection. Then there's what's called the ascension, where he goes back to heaven. He gives the Great Commission, goes back to heaven. And then he says, wait until I send the Holy Spirit. And then when the Holy Spirit comes at Pentecost, the church starts, and that's the birth of Christianity and the birth of the church. Those 5 things, death, resurrection, 40 days, going back to heaven, ascension, and then the Holy Spirit comes, those are actually a pattern. Listen very closely. They're a pattern that happens in your life many, many times. You have already been through this pattern many times. And as long as you're alive, you're going to go through the pattern of something dies, and then there's a resurrection, and there's a 40 days, and then there's the going back, the ascension, the letting go, and then there's the Holy Spirit comes in, does something new. So let me explain this. There are two kinds of death. And the two kinds of death are one where you die, and that's the end of your life on earth. But there's another kind of death that's what happens to a seed when you plant it in the ground. Jesus said this, unless a seed is planted in the ground and covered and dies, it just remains a seed. But if it dies, it sprouts new life. A lot of things new that happen in our life have to come out of something old that dies. And it's not necessarily a life, it could be a habit. An old habit needs to die for something new to start. An old relationship dies and a new one takes its place. This principle of death and resurrection happens in many areas of your life. You can have a financial death, so to speak. We lost it all. And a resurrection of a new kind of finance in your life. You can have a physical, a spiritual, an emotional, a relational, different things like that. So the first death is death and you just go to heaven. But the other kind of death are the little deaths that happen in life where you lose a friend, or you lose a job, or you lose a certain capacity in your life. We go through these little deaths all the time in our life so that something new can start. But after that, after the death comes the resurrection. Now there's two kinds of resurrection. There is Lazarus, you remember that story, and then there's Jesus. Lazarus had died and been dead for 3 days. And Jesus goes over to his tomb and says, Lazarus, come forth. Lazarus comes out. That wasn't actually a resurrection. That's what we would call a resuscitation, because he went back to live in his old way of life. He was just dead for a few days and he went back to live in his old way of life. A resurrection means I get a whole new life. When Jesus came back to life, he was never going to die again. Lazarus had to die again. Lazarus was raised from the dead by Jesus, but then he went back to live in his same old ways. He didn't really change. And then eventually he had to die again. When Jesus was resurrected, and everything changed. He got a whole new body. In fact, when Mary Magdalene runs up to him on Resurrection Day on Easter, tries to hug him, Jesus says, don't hug me, Mary, I haven't yet ascended yet. So it's a whole new thing. Sometimes you have a death and then you go back to your old way of life. Something dies in your life, you go back to your old way of life. But another way is you die and then you have to get a whole new life. Does that make sense? What I'm talking about here? So there's a couple kinds of death, a couple kinds of resurrection. Now, then the third phase, something dies in my life, something new starts in my life. Then the third phase is the 40 days. Jesus walked around on earth for 40 days in Jerusalem showing people, hey, I'm alive. I'm really here. How weird that would be if you saw Jesus die on the cross and 2 weeks later you go, there he is again, he's back. Okay, but what happened is that one of those stories in the 40 days, Jesus starts walking down a road called the road to Emmaus. It was a city. And 2 of his disciples are walking down that road. And Jesus walks up beside them, starts walking with them, starts talking to them, and they don't recognize it's Jesus. Why? Because in the third phase, in the third phase, when you're going through the 40 days, you're grieving and you're adjusting. Grieving and adjusting. That's the third phrase. Something dies in my life. It's no longer there.